Hello and welcome to interest.co.nz. I'm Janae Tipshirani and today I'm back with our Commerce and Consumer Affairs Minister, Kris Faafoi.
Thank you.
Kris, now I'd like to talk about open banking.
Yep.
So this is basically an idea or a concept that's been going on around the world where banks are sharing data with third parties. So this is clients' data, and the idea is that as a customer, I might like to use an app that isn't my banking app to manage my money. So I might like to give a third party permission to get some information from my bank to pass on that info. So I mean, this raises a whole bunch of issues.
Yep.
But you have committed to continuing what your predecessor, Jackie Dean, committed to, which was sort of telling banks that they can push on with this, and if they don't, then you might intervene.
Yeah, look, I think there's some exciting opportunity in open banking. I think if you take a step back from just the banking industry, this is just another example of where disruptive technology is creating opportunities for consumers to do things better. In this case, it's manage their money. Obviously, there are some concerns that everyone might have around privacy and security of their information, and I think they are some of the most basic issues that we'll need to work through. So, again, we'll hopefully work collaboratively with the banks to make sure that, we want to build a broad-based economy, and I think there are some clever people out there who in the technology space who would welcome the opportunity to, to design and sell this kind of technology, and we want to make sure we make the most of that.
Okay, so it seems the banks are getting on board with this,
yeah.
Right? We've got the banks getting on board, we have fintechs who are really keen on this as well. Do you think, though, the whole concept, even on a high level, does essentially require some regulation?
It might do, and I think once we get further down the road with the discussions as how we have access to information and security, especially around those areas, yes. But I think we're not far enough down the road. Other jurisdictions are further down the road than us. But in terms of the discussions with Payments New Zealand and all the banks, we're simply not far enough down the road to have any firm view of exactly what might need regulated.
Yeah, okay. I've been talking to the New Zealand Bankers Association, and they say they, on a broad level, support what the Australian Bankers Association has told their government they would like to see when it comes to open banking. And one of the things that the Australian Bankers Association has said in the submission is that they see open banking as the first phase of data sharing, and they want to sort of see it rolled out to other industries. What's your view on that? Yeah,
possibly. Nearly every facet of our lives these days, data has been collected about us. The first batter up, though, is the banking sector. So I think we'll probably learn a few lessons along the way from the discussions that we'll have as we get closer to making open banking more of a reality. I've had a very brief discussion with some of the banks, and this is the kind of thing that they're saying to us as well. Again, I think we have to think about the principles of both the privacy of our information, the security of information, and how that might be used. As you said before, people might be free and willing to give that up, but I think as a government we need to make sure, and this comes to a question about what might be regulated, that the information that is collected and used is used in a way that I think New Zealanders will be comfortable with.
Yeah, okay. So the Australian Banks Association has also suggested that the government puts in place what they've called an economy-wide regulatory framework to deal with data sharing, privacy, liability and security and so on. So they reckon that while they might be going ahead and passing on customers' data, often to customers who don't really know what they're doing when they say, oh, yep, share the data, I mean, who knows what that means, as a consumer, that they want to see a framework put in place across the economy. Obviously, this is further down the track, but what are your initial thoughts on that idea?
Look, I think we might have to get to that once, the free flow of data becomes more broad. Whether it be banking, whether it be supermarkets, whether it be other institutions that have open access to the kinds of behaviours that we have digitally these days, that we'll have to have some principles around how that information is shared and the privacy and security of it. I know one of the questions you're probably going to ask is what about government departments as well?
Yeah.
I think we have to be very careful about that, and we just haven't progressed those conversations far enough. But I would be very cautious about the kinds of information that a government collects and whether or not they can be disseminated. We do that in a broad sense through statistics, New Zealand at the moment, but if we're talking about the individual, those are conversations that we need to start having to make sure that the principles are there around privacy and security.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because you don't get information that's much more important than the information that your bank has about you, in terms of the importance of information held by various agencies, be they government departments or
yes, but we're in this context we're talking about financial transactions. There are whole lots of different kind of data and information that government departments might hold about New Zealanders, which is personal and possibly very sensitive to them.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about data and information, we have to take a step back, and I'll have those conversations with colleagues about how we might come toward that broader framework of how we treat data.
Sure. Okay. Minister, if we come back to banking, come April, which is the deadline
for Payments New Zealand
to come back to you, what do you see happening after that?
Look, hopefully we can put a bit of a timeline together, because I think there's opportunity in this open banking to make sure that if the banks are willing to open up their data and we've got the privacy and security settings right, that we can have our fintech companies who are thinking of developing products getting onto that as soon as we can. We've got some very clever people. Unfortunately, I think the Australians are a little bit ahead of us on this. So I don't think we can wait too long to make sure that the space is moving, so we can innovate and give, I think, the innovation that New Zealand consumers have historically had around payments systems. Around FPOS, we were kind of leaders in the way there, but I think in terms of our recent history, we've lagged back a bit. So if we can innovate again there, I think that's going to be a good thing for our economy. Okay,
sure. Look, another piece of innovation which is, mildly related to open banking is around digital identities. I spoke to ANZ's Head of Financial Crime, Paula Milne, in July, and she suggested might be a good idea if people who sign up to Real Me could consent to having their verified information shared with approved organisations like banks and lawyers and so on. So that means that if I, for example, go to a bank and I want to set a bank account, they have to do a whole lot of due diligence on me and check where my money's coming from and who I am. And if I go to a lawyer, they then need to do the same lot of due diligence. So this is largely under the anti-money laundering law. Whereas if I have a digital identity and Real Me says, okay, yep, that's who you are, then the bank can go, yep, tick, the lawyer can do the same. And they have to do a bit of due diligence, but it just streamlines the process. It's a big idea, but what are your thoughts?
Well, initially, off the top of my head and hearing that idea, then I think it would make things a lot more efficient. Making sure we can scrutinise digital identities is something that I think is going to hold a lot of transactions up in the future if we don't have a good system. I think one of the issues, and I don't know it off the top of my head, is potentially the uptake of Real Me. I don't think it's that large. I'm not sure if it's something that it was something that the last government created, but I'm not sure how well they pushed it in terms of the raw numbers of how many people actually signed up to it. So I think in theory a really good idea to make sure that we can make sure that if Janae says she's Janae, she's Janae.
Yeah, great. Okay, so pushing signing up to Real Me, is that something you might consider? I
don't think that's under my remit. I think that's under the Minister of Internal Affairs. Okay. But as more and more of our lives go online, and we're, in the last 10 years it's gone through the roof exponentially, making sure that we can quantify who people are and make sure that that we can kind of deal with people with confidence if we're transacting financial transactions is going to become even more important.
Sure. Right. Minister, thank you so much for your time once again. I'm Janae Tibishirani from interest.co.nz and have been joined by the Commerce and Consumer Affairs Minister, Kris Faafoi.